Most people think they're addicted to their phones because they lack discipline. But what if that's not true? What if you're not the problem, but the way everything around you is designed? Right now, there are billions of dollars being spent to keep you watching and scrolling more and more. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So today, we're breaking down the psychological tricks that are being used to keep us hooked and coming back for more. And we're gonna show you exactly how to take back control. But to understand this, I'm gonna first tell you a short story. When I was very young, I used to practice Judo. And I remember this one time my mother took me to a competition and I was so excited. I wanted to win, I wanted to get that medal. But I remember that it was this one kid that really stood out. In that big stadium, everybody was screaming and like cheering for him. Why? Because he wasn't that big, but he was beating every opponent that he was up against, match after match. And at some point, I looked up at my coach and I asked him, like, how come this kid is so powerful and strong? And the coach told me, Judo is not about force or power. It's about using your opponent's force against them. The core principle of Judo is called maximum efficiency with minimum effort. So when your opponent lunges towards you, you don't resist. You lean back, they lose balance, and then you guide them to the ground.
Nice.
That was the principle I learned from the coach back then. And it inspired me in business, in productivity, and life. But when I look back at it, the people who have mastered this concept the most of maximum efficiency with minimum effort are the people who have designed the addictive platforms we're all hooked on.
That's such a powerful distinction. Because when we talk about digital addiction, people tend to blame themselves. They start asking what's wrong with them, like, I don't have enough willpower, or I don't have enough discipline, I have an addictive personality. If it's not digital addiction, it would be something else. But they're not seeing the full picture. These platforms are not random, they're engineered.
And just like in Judo, the goal is to get your opponent to fall on the ground. In these addictive platforms, they have a measure that is their only goal, and it's called time on device. And it means how much time a user spends on the platform per day. And they want to increase that. So they've studied psychology, they learned our weak points, and they've used it against us.
So today, we want to break down these psychological tricks that keep us hooked, all the tricks that are embedded in the designs of these platforms, these addictive platforms like TikTok, Netflix, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. And more importantly, we want to see how to use the psychology to protect ourselves.
Because just like in Judo, you don't win force by force. You win by understanding how it all works and using it to your advantage.
Exactly.
So let's start with the first trick that is embedded in the design of these addictive platforms. And that trick is the autoplay, what I also like to call the default trap.
Yeah. There's a story about organ donation that Tony Robbins shares in one of his books. It shows how human behavior really works. And it goes like this. Imagine you're going into your local town hall and somebody asks you, would you like to donate your organs? What do you think you would say? Some people would go immediately and say yes and feel noble and generous. Some people would hesitate, maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable, turned off by how graphic the question is. And some people will try to postpone the decision and say, like, I need some time to think about it. But in all cases, you would assume that your decision is based on free will. You would assume that you made a thoughtful, personal choice of whether or not to donate your organs to save a person's life. But that's not exactly true. A lot of it depends on where you live. Like if you're in Germany, for example, there's 1 in 8 chance that you will donate your organs. 12% of the population does. But if you're in Austria, Germany's next door neighbor, 99% of people donate their organs. Whereas in Sweden, 89% donate. In Denmark, 4% donate. Why the disparity?
Why? They're close to each other.
Exactly. Is it culture? Is it fear? Is it religion? It turns out it's none of these. The disparity in the rates, in donor rates, has nothing to do with you personally or your cultural heritage, and it has everything to do with the wording on the form.
What?
Yes. If you look at the countries with the lowest donor rates, like Denmark, there's a question that says, check here if you want to participate in the donor program. And in the countries with the highest rates, like Sweden, the question says, check here if you don't want to participate in the donor program. And that's the secret. People don't want to check boxes. The problem with organ donation is not that people don't care, is that people care so much. We don't want to make this decision. This decision is hard, it's overwhelming. So we go for the default. Whatever is checked for us.
Wow, such a fascinating observation.
Exactly. And it explains, like this research explains specifically how human behavior works, how whenever we have a big decision to make, that we go for the default, for the easy option, for whatever is chosen for us. And we prefer to just freeze and do nothing.
Yeah. Like the autoplay is already decided for us. These addictive platforms have been designed in a way where you don't really get to choose. The default is continue.
Exactly. Like if you take Netflix, for example, you go for Netflix to watch one episode to take your mind off of work. You start the episode, it sucks you in. It's so vivid. You have the action, you have the colors, you have the scenario, the storyline. All of a sudden, the episode ends on a cliffhanger. So now you're in a dilemma. For a split second, you're in a dilemma. You want to know what happens next. At the same time, you have all the responsibilities calling you. A second later, you don't even get the time to decide. Netflix decides for you. Autoplay. The next episode plays. And because the decision is overwhelming, and it's hard to decide what you want to do next, you just go with the default. You just continue with the next episode.
Yeah.
And so this autoplay is designed intentionally so that you don't have to decide. It decides for you.
Yeah.
And I took Netflix as an example, but it's the same with YouTube. YouTube will queue video after video. You try to leave, and then there's this mini player following you around. You also have TikTok, where you try to exit, and suddenly it gives you another unrelated video. Like, what's wrong with TikTok? Really?
So true. I can't seem to get out of a video on TikTok.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Maria, what do you do to overcome this psychological trick?
The best way for me to not fall for this autoplay trick was to implement 3 things. The first one is to disable autoplay everywhere on all apps. You can do that in the settings. Second one was to remove that mini player that follows you around on YouTube. And the third one was to map the exit button on each platform, like a hotkey, a quick hotkey that you can use to go out of everything. Like if you're on TikTok, find that button that quickly gets you out of it and train yourself on it. Because when your brain gets a moment of sobriety, of consciousness, and you ask yourself, should I stop? You will go for what you've trained on, and you're gonna get out. They want the default to be autoplay, but you can create another default for yourself.
Nice. Now, you might be thinking, this is all too techy for me. I'm not a technical person. Like, you lost me at settings. So just to let you know, we're going to include in the description below a document that explains step by step how to change the settings in the apps so that it works all in your advantage. And now, Maria, what's the second psychological trick that kept you hooked?
The second one was the infinite scroll, what I call the no stopping point. You know, now I don't keep social media apps on my phone anymore. Because if I want to use them, for example, I want to reach out to somebody that I don't have their number, or I want to post content, I download the apps each time. I go inside, do whatever I wanted to do, log out, and delete the app again. Why? Because for me, even though that sounds like a lot of time, for me, social media apps are a tool. They should be used for a purpose. Just like a screwdriver. Do you walk around in your house with a screwdriver all the time? I bet not. And so I use social media apps like tools. I use them and I put them back. That's how, in my opinion, they should be used. But in the past, it wasn't the case. I used to scroll infinitely on Instagram and YouTube. And I remember this one time, I was scrolling on the videos of YouTube. I wasn't going inside any video. I was just going through the thumbnails for hours. And then at some point, I actually reached the bottom of the YouTube scrolling feed.
Is that even possible?
It is. At some point, I wanted to watch more videos to keep scrolling more.
Wow.
And I couldn't. And I was like, is there something wrong with my internet? Actually, no. At some point, I don't remember what was the exact message that I got, but it said there was no more videos to show me. Something like there's no more feed. And I didn't think that was possible. That was around 4 years ago. And that's when I realized I'm not actually addicted to watching the content. I'm more hooked on the motion of scrolling, the motion of going down in the feed.
That's a very, very important distinction.
Yeah.
Like so many people think that they are there for the content, like they check their phone and they're scrolling for more content. But a lot of them are actually addicted to the act of scrolling or of constantly refreshing their feed.
Yeah, that was the case for me. For example, when you go on Google and you type something in the search bar, you're looking for a specific question or a specific thing. You get results on page 1, page 2, page 3. You go through the entire page 1, and then at the end, you decide, do I want to continue to page 2 or stop? Did I answer my own question? Did I find what I was looking for? Most of us don't even click on page 2.
That's true.
That's because when a page ends, it gives you a break. It gives your mind a moment to ask, did I get what I was looking for? It's a break. It's a moment to think.
Yeah.
Conversely, if you think about how the design of these addictive platforms is, they've created pages that are bottomless. There's no ending to the page. There's not a moment where you can have a break and think, do I want to go on page 2 or not? There's no end. That's why it's so easy to infinitely scroll, because the page is bottomless. It is designed on purpose to make you addicted to it. There's no ending. There's no natural stopping point.
Okay, clear. What do we do now? Like, it's so easy to scroll endlessly. How can we make not scrolling endlessly easier?
For me, what worked the best against this trick were 3 things. The first one is beware of open systems. When you want to consume something, consume it in a container that has an end. Like consume an article, a page, a newspaper, a video, one video. Something that has an end, a stopping point that gets you to ask, did I have enough? Did I get what I was looking for? My second tip is, if you want to scroll or go through the feed, the best way to do that is on a laptop, on the browser version. Because scrolling is easy on the thumb. We're used to it. But when you do it on the laptop, it's not that nice. And so we don't enjoy it as much when we scroll on the laptop. So for me today, when I want to go through the feed of Instagram or YouTube, I only do it on the laptop, on the browser version.
Okay, interesting.
And my third tip is, I've heard the sentence so many times. I was in the app for 20 minutes and then I don't know how 4 hours passed. And I've said that same sentence many, many times. So instead of doing that and being too late on fixing the problem, how about before we go into the social media apps, we design our own stopping points. We put our own page 2 and our own page 3. And how do I do that today? I set an alarm clock. I make sure to tell somebody to interrupt me at a certain time. I create my own stopping point. I schedule something, or I say I want to go somewhere, or I put myself under pressure for something else. Now, I know sometimes it doesn't guarantee that you will stop, but by putting your own stopping point, you're giving yourself a chance to ask yourself, do I want to go to page 2 or not? It's not guaranteed that you will not ignore the alarm or whatever you've set yourself, but at least you're making a choice. And with time, you're gonna build the muscle again.
I love how practical these tips are. Like now that you're saying them, they feel like common sense, but they're very practical. So thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Now let's go to the third trick. The third psychological trick that keeps us hooked.
That would be decision fatigue, making the exit too hard. And I know you have a fascinating study about that.
Yeah, there's a mind-blowing study that was done to understand decision-making and how decision fatigue actually happens. And it's a study that was made on judges. So researchers analyzed over 1,000 decisions made by judges who were supposed to grant prisoners parole, grant or deny parole for prisoners. In the beginning of the day, around 65% of prisoners were granted parole. And as the day went on, that number started dropping. The day went on and the number went down. Up until right before the break, that number reached almost 0. Basically, right before the break, those judges stopped granting parole. And like most prisoners were denied parole right before the break. And that's not even the crazy part. So the judges went on their break, rested, came back, and started giving these decisions again. And now the number went back to 65%. Right after the break, again, 65% of prisoners were granted parole. And then the number went down and down and down. So what changed?
Yeah, what's happening?
Well, the prisoners did not change. Their situation did not change. You would assume that these judges are making their decisions based on facts, based on the crimes, based on the behaviors. But actually, it turned out that these judges are making their decisions based on how tired they are, based on their mental fatigue. So when you are forced to make decisions one after the other, you experience mental fatigue. And so the brain, when it's in that state of mental fatigue, starts going for the easy option. In their case, the easy option is to deny parole and let the prisoners continue their jail time.
Wow. You know, I even think this applies to shopping and simple daily things in our daily life. Like I noticed that when I'm going shopping, I make the first couple of decisions correctly, but then at some point I get tired of choosing. I start picking things impulsively, and I even pick things that I'm not gonna wear. I ask myself later, how did I pick this? And I think decision fatigue applies to every time we're forced to make decisions in a row.
Definitely. It does apply to very serious decisions like judges deciding parole. It applies to shopping. It applies to what am I going to watch next?
Yeah.
And so little decisions also can happen with decision fatigue. If this decision fatigue is affecting how judges are making a decision on someone else's freedom, what do you think happens when you are sitting in your bed, watching, alone, tired? Do you think you're going to make the right decision of stopping
Hell no.
and exiting?
No. Hell no.
Of
Yeah.
course not. And these engineers knew that. They knew that under mental fatigue and under decision fatigue, we don't make the right choice or the right decision. So what they decided to do, they decided to make the exit extremely difficult.
Yes, exactly. And that was my point. It's the idea that I can't find the exit button on certain apps. I can't seem to get out. If I want to get out of Netflix, leaving so soon. If I want to get out of YouTube, I have to click the back button at least 3 times so that the mini player stops following me around. And then I have to ignore those extra recommendations that I'm getting. Everything that gets pushed to you so that you just don't quit, don't get out.
Yes, exactly. So the key is not to decide when we're tired after 2-3 hours of scrolling, but to decide before we go in. Pre-decide the time you're gonna spend on Instagram, let's say. Put a timer, a time limit in the app. Do something that will nudge you. Just like if you decide you're gonna be there for 20 minutes, put a timer after 20 minutes and you'll get this nudge. If you decide to continue, then it's your decision. But at least you made a decision before you went in.
Exactly.
And schedule your next activity right after going online. So your next offline activity. It could be going out with friends. It could be going for groceries, going for the gym. But schedule it before you go in so that you don't have to make the decision when you're tired.
Yeah. And I think an important trick here is also to log out. Why did we allow them to make leaving out of the platform so hard, but going back in so easy? Like, I don't accept that. And that's why I log out of each platform every time I use it, and I even delete it. I think logging out is enough. Because it's like we're setting a boundary. We're saying, I don't want to keep the door open. I don't want to let you use me. You make it so hard for me to go out of the platform and yet so easy to come in. No, I'm closing the door. It's a boundary. When I want to go in, I log back in. It's an extra friction point. It makes entering hard just as much as going out.
I like that.
Yeah. The fourth trick that is used in the design of these addictive platforms is an emotional one, and it's called FOMO. And now it's a very trendy term. Everybody knows it.
Yes, FOMO, the fear of missing out. I used to think it's just a trendy word, but it turns out that even psychologists study it. Like now it's a coined term. Researchers and psychologists found that the people who experience FOMO the most, who experience this fear of missing out, are the people who go for their phone more often and are the people who feel more distracted all the time because they want to know what happens next. And they're also the people who are more likely to engage with content, even when they don't feel like it. So now it's not like they're going for the content. The content is so important and they don't want to miss such an important information, but it's more a fear of the content going without them.
And you can feel this in our daily life. Like you get this notification or this buzzing message and you start to think, what am I missing out on? What are they doing without me? Did I miss something important? And this makes you want to go back in.
Yes, and it creates tension and stress. It creates this feeling like, I want to check my phone now, not later, now.
Yeah. Because if you don't go back in to check on your friends' latest stories or updates, etc., it's going to go away in 24 hours. And so it makes you feel like I need to go back in now. And then you spend hours going through the feed, getting the latest updates, refreshing, and you just wasted hours just because you felt some urgency to get back in.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the stories that last 24 hours. Like that, these stories that last 24 hours are intentional design, because later on they created the highlights where you can save the stories on your profile and they stay there forever, but they kept the stories that last 24 hours. Why? Because they wanted to create this sense of urgency and this feeling of missing out. Like if you don't check your phone at least every 24 hours, you're gonna miss stories of your friends that are posted and they're gonna disappear into the wind. So you have the stories is one of the tricks that create this FOMO or that trigger this FOMO. You also have the content that gets buried in the feed. Like you have massive amounts of content. So if you are offline for like 2 weeks, like there's no way you can find this content again. And you also have the feed that refreshes constantly. Like, I don't know if you felt this before, but sometimes like we would be scrolling and I find a very interesting post and I'm scared to lose it. It's like I keep my thumb on the post and I'm scared that if I remove my thumb or if I scroll up or if I exit the app, I'm gonna lose it. So I send it to myself or I send it to you or I click the save button. Like, why do I need to feel this fear of losing something so simple as a piece of content?
Yeah.
But it's just the way we're wired. It's not our fault. It's just the way we're wired. And these engineers taking advantage of the way we're wired to trigger this FOMO.
Yes, they've specifically designed it to make us feel FOMO. It is intentional design. Nothing is by accident.
And so, how do we overcome this FOMO?
I think the best thing that worked for me to not fall for this trick anymore is to accept that I am gonna miss things and that we're not meant to be available all the time online, to know the latest updates, to know all the stories of everybody. We're just not meant to know everything at all time. And in fact, being connected all the time and up to date on everything actually makes us less focused and less at peace with ourselves.
True.
And the second thing was to question what is important enough for me that I would want to go in and not miss out on. Not what am I missing. I chose to never again say that question. What am I missing out on? No. What is important enough for me that I would go back in and not miss it? And very few things answered that question. And so now I go back in for specific purposes, get what I want, and get back out and log out and delete the app. That's how I battled FOMO in my life.
So instead of what am I missing, you're actually asking what deserves my attention.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And the fifth trick that is being used by these engineers to make the platforms very addictive is a very manipulative and powerful one, and it's called the variable reward.
You know, people think that to condition a behavior, you need to give a reward after every behavior. The monkey presses the button and he gets a banana, and then they prove that this is how you condition a behavior. That's why in parenting, like parents give their kid a gift or a chocolate whenever they do something good. But actually, now we know something different. Now we know that if you want to condition a behavior, you don't give a consistent level of reward after the action, but you actually alternate. So sometimes you give a reward that is higher than expected. Sometimes you give something lower than expected. Sometimes you don't give a reward at all. And sometimes you give just a little bit. And so this variable reward creates like an obsession to know what I'm gonna get. Am I gonna get a better reward this time, a lower reward this time? And so they go for the action again and again and again.
Yeah, and this was discovered by the psychologist Skinner in the 1950s. He was the one that discovered this concept of variable reward. And these engineers, they've used that discovery, that scientific psychological discovery, to use it against us in the design of the platforms to keep us scrolling more and more.
It's exactly the same mechanism that is used in the slot machines and what makes these slot machines so dangerous in the casinos. Like you pull the lever and you don't know what you're going to expect. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to win big, and sometimes you don't win at all. But this variable reward will make people addicted to gambling, for example.
Yeah, same thing in the feed. Sometimes you get a video that is fun, sometimes something graphic, sometimes something sad or emotional or like inspiring. And then every now and then you get this video that hits your emotions just right. And it makes you want to keep consuming and scrolling more and more. Maybe you'll find more of it. It's very powerful and it's been deliberately used in the design.
Yeah, and so many of us try to overcome this variable reward trick by making our feed boring. Like by unfollowing pages that make us binge, or by only following people we care about. And so we created a predictable feed, a feed that we know what to expect. And so we removed this variable reward. And so this lasted for a while. But then, as we said earlier, these engineers keep tweaking and testing and optimizing for maximizing time on device. And so they thought, oh, these users are so dumb and stupid. They don't know how to make their feed so interesting. So let's remove the decision-making power from these dumb, stupid people and give the decision-making power to the all-wise, all-knowing algorithm. And so now we can't even make our feed boring anymore, even if we wanted to, because they inputted this suggested for you feature. And so now you don't get to choose. It's the algorithm that interferes and adds content for you whenever you try to make your feed boring so that your feed is not predictable anymore. Like how manipulative can you get? Like they push you videos that you didn't ask for, pages that you don't follow, recommendations that you didn't even think about. Like they're invading your feed just because you're trying to make it predictable. And they want to add this variable reward. They want to add this novelty. They want to add this element of surprise so that when you have this variable reward, you have a higher tendency to scroll more to get more of this reward.
Yeah. So now, how can you combat this variable reward? My number one trick regarding this is to choose active consumption over passive consumption.
Okay.
And I'll explain that. When you go inside an app, go for the search bar directly. Go for the watch later list that you've created. Go into a specific account that you want to find something in. Watch their content. Choose things that you deliberately want to watch. And don't stay on the feed and just keep scrolling on the feed. Because it's like, imagine you're going at a buffet. Would you like somebody to just shove food into your mouth randomly? Food that you didn't choose? I bet not. I bet you want to walk around the buffet and pick the food that you like to consume. It's the same concept. Choose active consumption over passive consumption.
Makes sense.
There's a known sentence that says, I only consume the content that I choose, not what gets thrown at me.
And you can also use the browser extension that removes the recommendations. And this is also included in the document that you're going to find in the description. We'll show you the step-by-step on how to download the extension, how to set it up, so that your settings and your apps work to your advantage.
I like that. And another trick that works is to treat the homepage of social media apps like a danger zone. The homepage is the first page that gets thrown at you or that you land on whenever you open a social media app. And that is usually the most dangerous place because that page is the one that is the most designed and tweaked to make you stay on it for hours and to keep you scrolling there. So if you can avoid it immediately, do it.
Yeah. And the truth is, these platforms will not stop optimizing and tweaking and testing to maximize our time on device. That's their business model. That's their main KPI. That's the game.
Yeah. They get rewarded when they find new ways to keep you scrolling and watching longer. And if you've been feeling frustrated by how much time you've spent online, you're not alone and you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. Just like in Judo, we win by understanding how to use these psychological tricks to our advantage.
You are up against systems designed by very smart people who understand psychology very well. And so we cannot win by willpower alone. We win by being smarter, by building exits, by building lifeboats that protect us, protect our energy, protect our focus, protect our peace, because your time is more valuable than being monetized for somebody else's gains.
And as always, we'll be here with you. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, use technology. Don't let it use you. We wish you freedom and success.